Picture this: New York City, 2018. A woman named Sarah Mitchell sits in her corner office on the 42nd floor of a Manhattan skyscraper. Outside, the city buzzes with 8 million people racing toward their next appointment, their next deadline, their next moment of stress. Inside, Sarah stares at her computer screen, her heart pounding like a war drum. Her hands tremble. Her breath comes in short, shallow gasps. The email she just received could destroy everything she has built over the past decade. But something strange happens. Instead of spiraling into panic, instead of letting anxiety consume her like it had 1,000 times before, Sarah closes her eyes. She breathes. 1 breath, 2 breaths, 3. When she opens her eyes again, the email is still there. The problem has not vanished. But something fundamental has shifted. She feels calm. She feels centered. She feels positive about facing whatever comes next. What happened in those 3 breaths? What changed in Sarah's mind that transformed terror into tranquility? The answer lies in a discovery that scientists have been studying for decades, but most people never learn. A discovery that monks knew centuries ago, that neuroscientists confirmed just years ago, and that you are about to understand right now. This is not just another self-help story. This is the science of staying calm and positive in a world designed to make you anxious and negative. This is about rewiring your brain, not with drugs, not with therapy, but with techniques so simple that a child could do them, yet so powerful that they can transform your entire existence. The human brain is a paradox. It is the most sophisticated organ in the known universe, capable of creating symphonies and solving quantum equations. Yet it is also a primitive alarm system that treats a rude email the same way it treats a charging lion. Your amygdala, the almond-shaped cluster of neurons deep in your brain, cannot tell the difference between a real threat and an imagined one. When your boss sends a harsh message, your amygdala screams danger. When you check your bank account and see less than you hoped, your amygdala screams danger. When you scroll through social media and see others living seemingly perfect lives, your amygdala screams danger. This is the great tragedy of modern life. We live in the safest era in human history, with more abundance, more medicine, more opportunity than any generation before us. Yet we are more stressed, more anxious, more depressed than ever. Why? Because our brains are still running software from the Stone Age, trying to navigate a world of emails, deadlines, and Instagram posts. But here is the secret that changes everything. Your brain is not fixed. It is not hardwired. It is plastic, constantly reshaping itself based on what you think, what you practice, what you repeat. Neuroscientists call this neuroplasticity. What it means is that you can literally rewire your brain to default to calm instead of chaos, to positivity instead of pessimism. You can train your mind the same way you train your body at the gym. Let me take you back to a monastery in Tibet, 1987. A neuroscientist named Richard Davidson traveled from Madison, Wisconsin, to the remote mountains of the Himalayas. His mission was simple, but audacious. How he wanted to study the brains of Buddhist monks who had spent decades meditating, tens of thousands of hours sitting in silence, training their minds. What he found shocked the scientific community. When Davidson hooked these monks up to electroencephalogram machines to measure their brain activity, he discovered something impossible, Their brains showed levels of gamma waves that had never been recorded before in human history. Gamma waves are associated with attention, learning, and memory. But more importantly, these monks showed extraordinary activity in the left prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain associated with positive emotions, resilience, and well-being. These were not genetically special people. They were ordinary humans who had done something extraordinary, and they had trained their minds with the same dedication that Olympic athletes train their bodies, and their brains had transformed. But Davidson did not stop there. He wondered if ordinary people who did not live in monasteries, people who had jobs and families and bills to pay, could achieve similar results. So he designed an experiment. He took a group of stressed-out corporate employees and taught them simple meditation techniques. Just 45 minutes a day for 8 weeks. That was all. The results were stunning. Brain scans showed that after just 8 weeks, these everyday people began to show the same patterns as the monks, on a smaller scale but measurably real. Their left prefrontal cortex became more active. Their amygdala, the fear center, became less reactive. They reported feeling calmer, more positive, more resilient, not because their lives got easier, but because their brains had changed. This is the power you hold in your hands right now. The power to reshape your brain, to rewrite the story your mind tells itself, to transform anxiety into calm, negativity into positivity. But knowing this power exists is not enough. You must understand how to use it. You must learn the specific techniques that science has proven work. Technique number 1 is breath control, and it is so simple that most people dismiss it. But dismissing it would be the greatest mistake of your life. Your breath is the only part of your autonomic nervous system that you can consciously control. You cannot tell your heart to slow down directly. You cannot tell your digestion to speed up. But you can control your breath. And through your breath, you can control everything else. When you are stressed, your breathing becomes shallow and rapid. This is called chest breathing, and it happens because your sympathetic nervous system, your fight or flight response, has kicked in. Your body thinks you are in danger, so it prepares to run or fight. Your heart rate increases. Your muscles tense. Stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline flood your bloodstream. But here is the beautiful part. This process works in reverse. If you deliberately slow down your breathing, if you make it deep and rhythmic, your parasympathetic nervous system activates. This is your rest and digest mode, the opposite of fight or flight. Your heart rate decreases. Your muscles relax. Your brain receives the message that everything is okay, that there is no danger, that you can calm down. The most powerful breathing technique is called 4-7-8 breathing, developed by Dr. Andrew Weil based on ancient yogic practices. Here is how it works. You breathe in through your nose for 4 seconds, filling your lungs completely. You hold that breath for 7 seconds, allowing oxygen to saturate your blood. Then you exhale slowly through your mouth for 8 seconds, releasing all the air and all the tension. Why these specific numbers? Because the mathematics of breathing matter. When you hold your breath after inhaling, carbon dioxide builds up in your blood. This might sound bad, but it is actually good because it triggers the mammalian dive reflex, an ancient survival mechanism that immediately calms your nervous system. When you exhale for 8 seconds, longer than you inhaled, you activate the vagus nerve, the main highway of your parasympathetic nervous system. Do this 4 times in a row and you will feel the shift. Your shoulders will drop. Your jaw will unclench. Your mind will clear. Do this twice a day for 30 days, and you will rewire your brain's default response to stress. Instead of automatically panicking when challenges arise, your brain will automatically seek calm. But breath control is just the beginning. Technique number 2 is cognitive reframing, and this is where you become a mental alchemist, transforming negative thoughts into positive ones. Your mind is constantly telling you stories about what things mean. Your boss did not say good morning, therefore she must be angry at you. That is a story, not a fact. Your friend took 3 hours to respond to your text, therefore they must be upset with you. That is a story, not a fact. You made a mistake at work, therefore you are incompetent and everyone knows it. That is a story, not a fact. The human brain is a story-making machine. It takes random data points and weaves them into narratives. This is not a bug, it is a feature. It is how we make sense of a complex world. But most people let their brains tell negative stories automatically, without questioning them, without challenging them, without rewriting them into something more accurate and more helpful. Cognitive reframing means catching yourself in the act of negative storytelling and asking a simple question. Is this story true, or is it just one possible interpretation? Almost always you will discover that your negative story is just that, a story, one of many possible interpretations. And if you can tell yourself one story, you can tell yourself a different one. Let me give you an example from real life. A man named Marcus worked as a graphic designer at an advertising agency in Chicago. For 3 years, he poured his heart into his work, staying late, volunteering for extra projects, trying to prove himself. Then one day, his boss called him into the office and told him he was being let go. Budget cuts, nothing personal, just business. Marcus's first reaction was to tell himself the story that he was a failure, that he was not good enough, that he would never succeed in his field. This is the automatic negative narrative that most brains generate when faced with rejection or loss. But Marcus had been practicing cognitive reframing for 6 months. So instead of accepting this story as truth, he asked himself a different question. What else could this mean? Maybe it meant the universe was pushing him towards something better. Maybe it meant he would finally have time to work on his own projects, instead of always serving someone else's vision. Maybe it meant he would discover a career path he never would have explored if he had stayed comfortable. None of these interpretations were necessarily true, but neither was the story that he was a failure. They were all just stories, just possible meanings he could assign to the same event. Marcus chose to tell himself the story that this was an opportunity, not a catastrophe. He used the severance money to take an online course in user experience design, a field he had always been curious about but never pursued. 6 months later, he landed a job at a tech startup making 40% more than his old salary. As doing work he found far more fulfilling. Did the reframing make the job loss good? No. It was still painful, still scary, still inconvenient. But the story he told himself about it determined whether he spiraled into depression or rose into opportunity. That is the power of cognitive reframing. Not to deny reality, but to choose which aspects of reality you focus on and what meaning you give them. Technique number 3 is gratitude practice, and it might sound simple or even cliche, but the science behind it is profound. Gratitude is not just feeling thankful. It is a neurological intervention that physically changes your brain chemistry. When you consciously focus on things you are grateful for, your brain increases production of dopamine and serotonin, the neurotransmitters associated with happiness and well-being. But here is what most people get wrong about gratitude. They think it means pretending everything is perfect when it is not. They think it means ignoring problems or being naive about challenges. That is not gratitude. That is toxic positivity, and it is useless. Real gratitude means finding genuine appreciation even in difficult circumstances, not instead of acknowledging the difficulties, but alongside them. A woman named Janet discovered this the hard way. She lived in Seattle, working as a nurse in a busy hospital. Every day she dealt with pain, suffering, and death. She began to burn out, feeling nothing but negativity and exhaustion. Then a colleague suggested she try a gratitude practice. Janet resisted at first. How could she be grateful when surrounded by so much suffering? But she was desperate, so she agreed to try. Every night before bed, she would write down 3 things she was genuinely grateful for from that day. She kept this practice for 30 days, and something shifted. She started noticing more moments worth appreciating during her workday: a patient's smile, a colleague's kindness, a moment of unexpected beauty when sunlight streamed through a hospital window. Her brain was being retrained to look for the good without ignoring the bad. After 90 days, Janet's depression scores had dropped by 62%. She was the same person, doing the same job, in the same broken system. But her brain had changed. The mechanism behind this is fascinating. Your brain has something called the reticular activating system, essentially a filter that determines what information gets through to your conscious awareness. Every second, millions of pieces of data bombard your senses. You cannot possibly process all of it, so your brain filters out most of it. But here is the crucial part. Your brain decides what is important based on what you have trained it to look for. If you constantly think about threats and problems, your reticular activating system will filter reality to show you more threats and problems. If you train your brain to look for things to appreciate, it will filter reality to show you more things to appreciate. Technique number 4 is physical movement, and this might seem obvious, but most people drastically underestimate how much their mental state depends on their physical state. Your brain and body are not separate entities. They are one integrated system. Exercise is the most underutilized antidepressant in the world. A Duke University study compared exercise versus antidepressant medication for treating major depression. All groups showed improvement after 4 months, but the exercise-only group had the lowest relapse rate at just 9%, compared to 38% for medication only. Why? Because exercise physically rebuilds your brain. When you exercise, your body produces brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which stimulates the growth of new neurons in the hippocampus, the brain region responsible for memory and emotional regulation. But you do not need to run marathons or spend hours at the gym. A man named David proved this. He lived in Phoenix, Arizona, working a desk job that kept him sitting for 10 hours a day. He was overweight, pre-diabetic, chronically stressed, and increasingly depressed. His doctor prescribed antidepressants, But David wanted to try something else first. He started small, embarrassingly small, he thought. Every morning before showering, he would do 10 push-ups. That was all. Just 10 push-ups. It took less than a minute. Some days he could barely do 10. Some days he could only do 7 or 8. But he did it every single morning. After 2 weeks, he added 10 squats. After 4 weeks, he added a 10-minute walk around his neighborhood. After 8 weeks, he was doing a full 20-minute routine of body weight exercises plus a 30-minute walk. Nothing extreme. Nothing that required a gym membership or special equipment. Just consistent, moderate movement. After 3 months, David's depression had lifted completely. His energy levels had tripled. His blood sugar had normalized. His wife said he seemed like a different person, happier, more patient, more engaged with life. When his doctor ran blood tests, she found that his cortisol levels, the stress hormone, had dropped by 47%. His serotonin levels had increased by 32%. His brain had literally restructured itself through movement. The key is consistency, not intensity. Your brain does not care if you lift heavy weights or run fast miles. Your brain cares about regular, repeated signals that your body is strong, capable, and safe. 10 minutes of daily movement sends that signal more effectively than 1 hour of intense exercise once a week. The repetition is what rewires the neural pathways. Technique number 5 is social connection, and this is perhaps the most overlooked factor in mental well-being. Human beings are social animals. Your brain is wired to need other people, not want them, need them, the same way it needs food and water. When you lack meaningful social connection, your brain perceives this as a threat. The Harvard study of adult development, tracking people for over 85 years, identified one factor that predicted happiness and health more than any other. Not money, not fame, not career success. Relationships. People who had close, warm relationships lived longer and reported greater life satisfaction. But here is the problem. Modern life systematically destroys social connection. We work longer hours, often alone or in competitive environments. We move frequently, leaving behind old friends and struggling to make new ones. We replace face-to-face interaction with digital communication, which gives the illusion of connection without the neurological benefits. We prioritize productivity over presence, tasks over togetherness. A woman named Alessia experienced this firsthand. She moved to Austin, Texas for a high-paying job at a tech company. She left behind her family, her childhood friends, her entire support network. At first she was excited, new city, new opportunities, new life. But after 6 months, she felt profoundly alone. She had coworkers, but not friends. She had hundreds of followers on social media, but no one she could call at 2 a.m. when she could not sleep. She started feeling anxious constantly. Small problems felt overwhelming. She would lie in bed at night, scrolling through her phone, seeing pictures of her old friends living their lives without her, and she would feel invisible, forgotten, disconnected. Her productivity at work dropped. Her boss noticed. She noticed. Then one day, while scrolling through local events, she saw a pottery class. She had never done pottery before, had no particular interest in it, but the class met every Thursday evening at a community center near her apartment. She signed up not because she wanted to make pottery, but because she was desperate for human contact. The first class was awkward. She did not know anyone. Her first pot collapsed into a misshapen lump. But the instructor was kind, and another student laughed warmly when her own pot fell apart too. They started talking, then laughing. By the end of the class, Alicia felt lighter than she had in months. She kept going to pottery class, not because she suddenly fell in love with ceramics, but because she had found her tribe. The same 8 people showed up every Thursday. They learned each other's names, then their stories, then their struggles. They started meeting for coffee before class, then dinner after, then weekend hikes. Within 3 months, Alicia had what she had been missing. Real friends, people who knew her, who cared about her, who would show up if she needed them. Her anxiety disappeared, not because her job got easier or her life circumstances changed, but because her brain no longer perceived her as isolated and vulnerable. She had a tribe again. Her nervous system could relax. This is not sentimentality. This is biology. When you connect with others in meaningful ways, your brain releases oxytocin, sometimes called the bonding hormone. Oxytocin reduces cortisol, the stress hormone. It increases feelings of trust and safety. It literally makes you calmer and more positive at a neurological level. You do not need dozens of friends. You need 1 or 2 real connections. People you can be honest with. People who see you, not your performance or your achievements or your social media highlight reel, but you, the real messy, complicated human you. Find those people. Nurture those relationships. They are not a luxury. They are a necessity for your mental health. Technique number 6 is sleep. And most people know they should sleep more, but do not understand why it is so critical. Your brain is not just resting when you sleep. It is performing essential maintenance. During deep sleep, your brain clears cellular waste. During rapid eye movement sleep, your brain processes emotions and consolidates memories. When you do not get enough sleep, your amygdala becomes 60% more reactive to negative stimuli. Your prefrontal cortex becomes impaired. You are walking around with a hyperactive alarm system and a broken control panel. A man named Robert discovered this in a brutal way. He was a lawyer in Boston working on a high-stakes case that consumed his life. For 3 months, he averaged 4 to 5 hours of sleep per night, fueled by coffee and adrenaline. He thought he was handling it well. He was functioning, getting work done, meeting deadlines. But then small things started breaking him. A barista got his coffee order wrong, and he nearly screamed at her. His daughter asked him to help with homework, and he snapped at her for interrupting his work. His wife suggested he seemed stressed, and then he erupted into a 20-minute rant about how she did not understand the pressure he was under. These were not normal reactions. This was not who he was. But sleep deprivation had turned him into a different person, someone whose emotional regulation was completely compromised. His brain was drowning in stress hormones with no way to clear them out. After the case ended, Robert forced himself to prioritize sleep. 8 hours a night, non-negotiable. The first few nights he could not even stay asleep that long. His brain was so wired that it would wake him up after 5 or 6 hours. But he stayed in bed, stayed dark and quiet, gave his body the opportunity to rest, even if his mind resisted. After 2 weeks, something shifted. He started sleeping through the night. After 4 weeks, he felt like a different human being. Problems that had felt insurmountable now seemed manageable. Interactions that would have triggered anger now rolled off him. He had not changed his circumstances. His job was still demanding. His life was still complex, but his brain had the resources to handle it. The transformation was so dramatic that his wife asked if he had started medication. He had not. He had just given his brain what it needed to function properly: sleep. If you want to stay calm and positive, you must treat sleep as sacred, not negotiable, not optional, not something you sacrifice for productivity or entertainment. Your sleep is the foundation of your mental health. Protect it. Technique number 7 is mindfulness meditation. And before you dismiss this as New Age nonsense, understand that mindfulness is now one of the most rigorously studied interventions in neuroscience. Thousands of peer-reviewed studies have demonstrated its effects on brain structure and function. This is not belief. This is biology. Mindfulness means paying attention to the present moment without judgment, not trying to change anything, not trying to fix anything, just observing what is happening right now, in your body, in your mind, in your environment. This sounds simple, but it is radically different from how most people live. Most people spend their mental energy rehashing the past or worrying about the future. They are never actually here in this moment. A woman named Lisa had suffered from panic attacks for 15 years. They would strike without warning, sudden, overwhelming waves of terror that made her heart race, her vision blur, her mind convince her she was dying. She had tried medication, therapy, breathing exercises. Some things helped a little, but the attacks always came back. Then she attended an 8-week mindfulness-based stress reduction course, a program developed by Dr. John Kabat-Zinn at the University of Massachusetts Medical School. The course taught her a specific practice. When she felt panic beginning, instead of trying to fight it or escape it, she would simply observe it. She would notice the sensation of her heart beating faster. She would name it to herself. There is a rapid heartbeat. She would notice the tightness in her chest. There is tightness. She would notice the fearful thoughts. There are scary thoughts about dying. But she would not engage with these sensations and thoughts. She would not argue with them or try to push them away. She would just observe them, like a scientist observing data. Something miraculous happened when she stopped fighting the panic, when she stopped adding fear to the fear. The attacks lost their power. The physical sensations would still happen. Her heart would still race. Her breathing would still quicken. But without the layer of mental resistance, these sensations would peak and then subside naturally, like a wave rolling in and then rolling back out. After 3 months of daily mindfulness practice, Lisa's panic attacks decreased by 90%. After 6 months, they were almost non-existent. Her brain had learned a new response. Instead of perceiving panic as an emergency that needed to be escaped, her brain learned to perceive it as a temporary physical experience that would pass on its own. Brain scans of people who practice mindfulness meditation show measurable changes. The amygdala, the fear center, actually shrinks. The prefrontal cortex, the rational thinking center, thickens. The connection between these two regions strengthens, meaning the rational part of your brain becomes better at regulating the emotional part. This is not metaphorical. This is literal structural change in your brain tissue. You do not need to meditate for hours. You do not need to sit in a lotus position or chant mantras. You can practice mindfulness while washing dishes, while walking, while eating. The practice is simply bringing your full attention to whatever you are doing, noticing when your mind wanders, and gently bringing it back. Without judgment, without criticism, just bringing it back. Start with 5 minutes. Sit quietly. Notice your breath. When your mind wanders, and it will wander hundreds of times, gently bring your attention back to your breath. Do not judge yourself for wandering. Wandering is what minds do. The practice is noticing the wandering and returning. That is the exercise. That is what rewires your brain. Technique number 8 is purpose, and this is the deepest factor in staying calm and positive. Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist who survived Auschwitz, wrote that survivors were not the strongest or healthiest, but those who had a reason to survive, a purpose beyond themselves. Purpose is not pleasure. Pleasure is feeling good in the moment. Purpose is knowing your life means something, and that you are contributing to something larger than yourself. A person with purpose can endure tremendous suffering. A person without purpose can have every comfort and still feel empty. A man named Thomas experienced this contrast. He had spent 20 years climbing the corporate ladder, achieving every marker of success. Senior vice president at a Fortune 500 company, house in the suburbs, luxury car, country club membership. By every external measure, he had made it. But at 52 years old, Thomas felt nothing but emptiness. He would sit in his expensive home office looking at his awards and certificates and wonder why he felt so dead inside. He was not depressed in the clinical sense. He could function. But there was no joy, no meaning, no sense that anything he did actually mattered. Then his company asked him to mentor a young employee named Marcus, who came from a difficult background and was struggling to navigate corporate culture. Thomas almost declined. He was busy, and mentoring seemed like a waste of time. But something made him say yes. Over the next 6 months, Thomas met with Marcus every week. He taught him not just job skills, but life skills. How to communicate, how to handle rejection, how to build confidence. He watched Marcus transform from a nervous, insecure kid into a capable, confident professional. And something unexpected happened. Thomas started feeling alive again. He realized that his 20 years of climbing the ladder had given him knowledge and experience that could genuinely help others. He started mentoring more young employees, and then he started volunteering at a nonprofit that helped formerly incarcerated people find employment. He used his corporate connections to open doors for people who would otherwise have no access. His life circumstances did not change much. He still had the same job, the same house, the same routine. But his sense of purpose transformed everything. The meaningless meetings now felt meaningful because the money he earned funded his volunteer work. The boring corporate politics now felt manageable because they were not the center of his life anymore. He had found something bigger than himself to serve. Studies on longevity consistently show that people with a strong sense of purpose live longer and stay healthier than those without, even when controlling for other factors. Purpose is protective. It gives your brain a reason to stay resilient, to find the positive even in difficulty, because the difficulty is in service of something worthwhile. You do not need to save the world. You do not need a grand mission. You need something beyond yourself that gives your life meaning. Maybe it is raising children. Maybe it is creating art. Maybe it is helping your community. Maybe it is mastering a skill. Maybe it is being a good friend. The specific purpose matters less than having one. Ask yourself this question. If you were gone tomorrow, what would be left behind? What impact would your life have made? If the answer is nothing, or if the answer makes you feel empty, then you need to find your purpose. It will not make you happy every day, but it will make you calm and positive even on the hard days, because you will know those hard days are worth enduring. Now let me tie all these techniques together into a practical framework, because knowing these strategies is worthless if you do not implement them. The morning is when you set the tone for your entire day. Most people wake up and immediately grab their phone, flooding their brain with stress before they are even fully conscious. Instead, protect your morning. Wake up without hitting snooze. Do not check your phone for at least 30 minutes. Start with movement, even just 5 minutes. Stretch, do push-ups, walk around your block, then practice mindfulness. Sit for 5 to 10 minutes. Notice your breath, then practice gratitude. Write down 3 specific things you appreciate. Then set your intention for the day. How do you want to show up? This entire morning routine takes 30 minutes. Throughout the day, practice breath control whenever stress arises. You feel tension building before a difficult conversation. 4-7-8 breathing. You receive bad news. 4-7-8 breathing. You are stuck in traffic. 4-7-8 breathing. Make it automatic. Train your brain that stress is the trigger for calm breathing, not for panic. Practice cognitive reframing with every negative thought. Catch yourself telling negative stories and challenge them. My boss did not smile at me, therefore she hates me. Stop. Is that true, or is that just one interpretation? Maybe she is stressed. Maybe she did not see me. Maybe she is dealing with something difficult. None of these are definitely true either, but they are equally plausible, and they do not make me spiral into anxiety. Throughout the day, seek micro moments of connection. A genuine smile at a stranger, a real conversation with a coworker, instead of just transactional small talk, a phone call to a friend instead of a text. These moments accumulate. They signal to your brain that you are not alone. In the evening, move your body again, even a 20-minute walk. Exercise clears stress hormones and prepares your brain for quality sleep. Then create a shutdown ritual. Your brain needs a clear signal that the workday is over. Maybe you change clothes. Maybe you light a candle. Maybe you write down tomorrow's to-do list so your brain does not have to hold it. Something that says work is done, presence is now. Dinner should be without screens. Eat real food, but not processed junk that spikes your blood sugar and crashes your mood. Sit with people if possible. Make it a moment of connection, not just fuel consumption. At least 90 minutes before bed, cut off all screens. Blue light from phones and computers suppresses melatonin production and ruins sleep quality. Read a physical book. Take a bath. Have a real conversation. Give your brain time to wind down. Then sleep. 8 hours, non-negotiable. Dark room. Cool temperature. Consistent bedtime. Treat your sleep like the sacred foundation it is. This is the framework. Morning activation. Daytime regulation. Evening wind down. Weekly rhythms of connection and purpose. It is not complicated, but it is consistent. And consistency is what rewires your brain. You will fail sometimes. You will skip your morning routine. You will spiral into negative thinking. You will stay up too late scrolling through your phone. This is normal. This is human. The practice is not perfection. The practice is returning. When you notice you have fallen off, you do not judge yourself or give up. You just return. You start again. Every moment is a new opportunity to choose calm over chaos, positivity over negativity. The transformation does not happen overnight. Your brain has been wired a certain way for years, maybe decades. It will take time to rewire it, but the science is clear. Neuroplasticity is real. Your brain will change if you give it the right inputs consistently. There is a phenomenon in neuroscience called the consolidation curve, when you learn something new. Whether it is a physical skill like playing piano or a mental skill like staying calm under pressure, your brain goes through predictable stages. The first stage is conscious incompetence. You know what you should do, but you cannot do it automatically yet. You have to think about it. Remind yourself, force yourself. This stage is frustrating because you keep failing. You know the breathing technique, but in the moment of stress, you forget to use it. You know you should reframe negative thoughts, but you catch yourself hours later still ruminating. Most people quit during this stage. They try the techniques for a few days or weeks. They struggle, and they conclude that the techniques do not work. But the techniques are working. The struggle is the work. Every time you catch yourself forgetting and then remember, that is a rep. And every time you fail and then try again, you are strengthening the neural pathway. The struggle is not evidence of failure. The struggle is the mechanism of change. The second stage is conscious competence. You can do the thing, but you still have to think about it. You can stay calm in a stressful situation, but only if you deliberately remember to breathe, deliberately choose to reframe, deliberately apply the techniques. This stage feels effortful, but it also feels empowering. You start to see results. Problems that used to overwhelm you now feel manageable. Situations that used to trigger anxiety now get handled with relative grace. The third stage is unconscious competence. The techniques have become automatic. You do not think about breathing calmly. You just do. You do not consciously reframe negative thoughts. Your brain automatically looks for alternative interpretations. Calm and positivity have become your default state, not something you have to manufacture through effort. This third stage is the goal, and it is absolutely achievable. But you have to persist through the first two stages. You have to accept that change is uncomfortable and slow. You have to trust the process even when immediate results are not visible. Sarah Mitchell, the woman from the beginning of this story, practiced these techniques for 90 days. The first 2 weeks were hard. She kept forgetting her morning routine. She caught herself spiraling into negative thoughts constantly. She felt like she was failing, but she kept practicing. She kept returning. And somewhere around day 21, she noticed something had shifted. A crisis happened at work, to something that would have destroyed her 6 months earlier. Her company's biggest client threatened to leave. Millions of dollars at stake. Her job potentially on the line. The old Sarah would have spent the entire night awake, heart racing, mind catastrophizing about worst-case scenarios, about being fired, about never finding another job, about losing her apartment, about everything collapsing. But this Sarah did something different. When she received the email, she felt the familiar surge of panic beginning. But instead of fighting it or drowning in it, she noticed it. She watched her heart rate increase. She observed the thoughts forming. There is the story about being fired. There is the fear of financial ruin. But she did not engage with these thoughts. She just noted them, like a weather report noting clouds. Then she breathed. 4 seconds in, 7 seconds hold, 8 seconds out. She did this 5 times. By the 5th breath, her heart rate had slowed. The panic had not disappeared, but it had lost its grip. She could think clearly again. She reframed the situation. Instead of "this means my career is over," she asked what else this could mean. Maybe it meant the client had legitimate concerns that needed addressing. Maybe it meant an opportunity to improve the service. Maybe it meant she would learn valuable skills in crisis management. She did not know which interpretation was true, but she chose the one that allowed her to take productive action instead of paralyzed fear. She broke the problem into parts. She could not solve the entire crisis tonight, but she could draft an email acknowledging the client's concerns and requesting a meeting. She could prepare talking points. She could reach out to her team for support. These were concrete actions she could take right now, which gave her brain a sense of control instead of helplessness. That night, she still felt anxious. She was not superhuman. The situation was genuinely difficult, but the anxiety was manageable. It did not consume her. She slept 6 hours, not great, but adequate. She woke up the next morning and did her routine: movement, mindfulness, gratitude, intention. By the time she walked into the office, she felt centered and ready. The meeting with the client happened. It was tense, but she stayed calm. She listened to their concerns without getting defensive. She acknowledged where the service had fallen short. She proposed specific improvements with specific timelines. The client appreciated her professionalism and her accountability. They agreed to stay with conditions. Crisis averted. That night, she sat in her apartment and cried, not from sadness, but from relief and wonder. She realized that her brain had actually changed. The techniques that had felt forced and awkward 8 weeks earlier had become automatic. She did not have to force herself to stay calm anymore. Calm had become her default. This is not unique to Sarah. This is how neuroplasticity works for everyone. A study at Massachusetts General Hospital used functional magnetic resonance imaging brain scans on participants before and after an 8-week mindfulness program. The scans showed measurable physical changes. The gray matter density in the amygdala decreased. The gray matter density in the hippocampus increased. These are not subtle changes. These are structural alterations visible on brain imaging. Another study at Carnegie Mellon University found that just 25 minutes of mindfulness practice per day for 3 days in a row reduced participants' cortisol levels and improved their stress resilience. 3 days, not 3 months or 3 years. The brain responds quickly to consistent input. But here is the crucial point that most people miss. The techniques only work if you apply them during actual stress, not just during calm moments. It is like learning to swim by reading about swimming. You can understand the theory perfectly, but until you get in the water and actually practice, when you are afraid and struggling, you have not really learned. This is why Sarah's breakthrough happened during a real crisis, and not during her peaceful morning meditation. The meditation prepared her brain, built the neural pathways, gave her the tools, but she proved to herself that the tools worked by using them under pressure. That is when the transformation becomes real and permanent. A man named Carlos experienced this in a different way. He lived in Miami, working as an emergency room nurse. His job was inherently stressful. Life and death situations, traumatic injuries, grieving families. He had been practicing meditation and gratitude for 2 months, and he felt calmer at home. But at work, he still felt overwhelmed constantly. Then one shift, everything went wrong simultaneously. A car accident brought in 6 patients at once, all critical. The radiology department was short-staffed, creating delays. A family became hostile, threatening to sue. Just the attending physician was having a bad day and snapped at everyone. Carlos felt the familiar wave of overwhelm building, the sense that he could not handle all of this, that he was going to break down. But instead of spiraling, he paused, literally stopped moving for 10 seconds. He breathed, right there in the middle of the chaos with people shouting and monitors beeping. He took 3 deep breaths. Then he chose one task. He could not solve all 6 crises at once, but he could focus on the patient in front of him right now. He stabilized that patient, then the next, then the next, breaking an overwhelming situation into manageable sequential steps. When the shift ended 6 hours later, Carlos felt exhausted, but not destroyed. He had stayed calm enough to do good work, and he had stayed positive enough to support his teammates instead of adding to the negativity. He walked to his car, sat in the driver's seat, and felt something he had not felt in years at this job: pride. Not in some heroic sense, but in the quiet satisfaction of knowing he had handled immense pressure without falling apart. This became his new normal, not because his job got easier, it did not, but because his brain had learned to respond differently. The techniques that had seemed abstract and theoretical became practical survival tools, and that is when transformation becomes irreversible. When you prove to yourself that you can stay calm and positive even in the worst circumstances, you know at a deep level that you are capable of handling whatever life throws at you. That is what is possible for you, not a life without challenges, not a fantasy world where nothing bad ever happens, but a brain that remains calm and positive even when facing real difficulties, a nervous system that does not hijack you into panic, a mind that can find the good without denying the bad. You have the tools now. You have the techniques. You have the science. But more importantly, you have the knowledge that your brain is not fixed. It is not permanent. It is plastic, malleable, waiting to be shaped by what you practice. Every moment of conscious breathing is reshaping your nervous system. Every act of cognitive reframing is rewiring your thought patterns. Every night of quality sleep is rebuilding your emotional regulation. Every moment of genuine connection is strengthening your resilience. The question is not whether you can change. Neuroscience has proven that you can. The question is whether you will commit to the daily practice that makes change inevitable, whether you will persist through the uncomfortable stage of conscious incompetence when you know what to do but cannot do it automatically yet, whether you will trust the process when progress feels slow and results feel distant. The answer to that question determines everything. Because if you commit, if you practice these techniques consistently for 90 days, your brain will transform. Not might transform, will transform. The science is that clear. The results are that predictable. Neuroplasticity is not a maybe. It is a biological certainty. Give your brain consistent input, and it will reorganize itself accordingly. Imagine yourself 90 days from now. You wake up without that immediate surge of anxiety about the day ahead. You breathe deeply, not because you are forcing yourself, but because it has become natural. You notice negative thoughts arising, but they do not hook you anymore. You observe them, choose different interpretations, and move forward. Challenges happen, they always will, but they do not devastate you. You handle them with calm clarity, breaking them into manageable steps, taking action from a centered place instead of reactive panic. This version of you is not a fantasy. This version is who you become through practice. And the practice starts right now. Not tomorrow when you are more motivated. Not next week when things calm down. Not next month when you have more time. Now. This moment. The moment you finish this sentence, you can take one conscious breath. That is the beginning. That is how transformation starts. One breath, then another, then another. Day after day until the new patterns become automatic and the old patterns fade into memory. The path is clear. The choice is yours. Your brain is waiting to be transformed. All you have to do is begin. 2 years after learning these techniques, Sarah Mitchell sat in the same corner office in Manhattan, staring at the same city skyline. But everything was different. Not the external world, but her internal experience of it. Another crisis email arrived. This time she smiled slightly, recognizing the old familiar trigger that used to send her into panic. She took 3 deep breaths, exactly as she had trained herself to do. She noticed the anxiety trying to rise, but she watched it like a scientist observing a phenomenon, without being consumed by it. She broke the problem into parts, made a plan, and took action from a place of calm clarity instead of reactive fear. That evening, she met her old college roommate for dinner. They talked about life, relationships, careers. Her friend noticed something had changed about Sarah, a groundedness that had not been there before. When her friend asked what was different, Sarah told her about the techniques, about the breathing, about the reframing, about the daily practices that had rebuilt her brain. Her friend was skeptical, as Sarah herself had been 2 years earlier, but she saw the evidence sitting across from her. Someone who had been chronically anxious now radiated a deep, genuine calm. The transformation is real, the science is sound, the techniques work, but they only work if you work them. Thousands of people have learned these same strategies and remained unchanged, not because the strategies failed, but because they never committed to the practice. They read about it, understood it intellectually, and then returned to their old patterns. Do not let that be you. You now possess knowledge that can change everything. Knowledge about how your brain works, about how it can be rewired, about specific techniques proven by science to create calm and positivity. This knowledge is worthless if it stays theoretical. It is priceless if you apply it. If this audiobook has given you value, if you see yourself in Sarah's story, if you recognize that you have been living with a hyperactive alarm system and you are ready to reprogram it, then take action right now. Not tomorrow, not next week. Now. First, decide. Actually decide that you are going to prioritize your mental well-being, not in a vague, someday kind of way, but with the same seriousness you would bring to a medical diagnosis. Your mental health is not optional. It is foundational to everything else in your life. Second, start small. Do not try to implement everything at once. Pick one technique. Maybe it is 4-7-8 breathing twice a day. Maybe it is a 5-minute morning meditation. Maybe it is writing 3 gratitudes every night. Just one thing. Master it. Make it automatic. Then add another. Third, track your progress. Keep a simple journal. Rate your anxiety and positivity on a scale of 1 to 10 every day. Not to judge yourself, but to collect data. You will forget how anxious you used to feel. The journal will remind you how far you have come and motivate you to keep going. Fourth, share this knowledge. If you found value in this audiobook, someone in your life needs it too. Your friend who always seems stressed. Your family member who struggles with negativity. Your colleague who is burning out. Send them this audiobook. Talk to them about these techniques. When you teach something, you solidify your own understanding, and you might just save someone from years of unnecessary suffering. Fifth, subscribe to this channel. We create content about neuroscience, psychology, and practical techniques for transforming your mind and your life. Every week, new insights, new research, new strategies. By subscribing, you commit to ongoing learning and growth. You signal to yourself that your mental well-being is a priority, not just today, but every day. And finally, like this video and leave a comment about which technique resonated most with you. Not for the algorithm, though that helps us reach more people who need this information, but for you. When you articulate what you have learned, when you put it into words, you activate different neural pathways. You remember it better. You integrate it deeper. You commit more fully. Your calm, positive future self is waiting. The version of you who does not spiral into panic over small setbacks, who does not lie awake at night replaying conversations and imagining disasters, who faces challenges with clarity and confidence, who enjoys the present moment instead of always worrying about the future. That person is not a fantasy. That person is who you become when you rewire your brain with consistent practice. The journey begins with a single breath. Take it now. 4 seconds in. 7 seconds hold. 8 seconds out. Feel the shift. That is your nervous system responding. That is your brain learning. That is the beginning of your transformation. Welcome to the rest of your life. Welcome to calm. Welcome to positivity. Welcome to the person you were always meant to be.